Phase 1, though, of the DUI detection and standardized field sobriety training course is the vehicle in motion. There are 28 driving behaviors that are identified as impaired driving that would give an officer probable cause to stop a vehicle. Speeding, incidentally, is not one of them, okay? And I know that a lot of people have stops for speeding. Doesn't mean that the stop is unlawful, but it does mean that it's not statistically correlated with impairment. And of course, we've all got our weaving within the lane of traffic, where you've got an officer. I've got one over in Livonia. Almost every case that he's had, he's a younger officer, has been a stop for weaving within the lane of traffic. And yet we've got this case law out there that says you can't just stop somebody willy-nilly for weaving momentarily in their lane of traffic. So you take this class, though, and you learn about these things. Phase 2 is the personal contact phase. This is the signs and symptoms that a person may have been drinking. Police officers are trained to go through this systematically. What do the eyes, the ears, and the nose detect, all right? Do you see disheveled appearance? Do you see open containers? Do you hear inconsistent responses? Do you smell the odor of an intoxicant or the odor of an alcoholic beverage? All of these things make their way into the police reports in a systematic way. And that systematic way allows you as a defense attorney to effectively cross-examine, because you start off on an objective plane that we can at least agree on this, right? And go from there. The tests, I'm going to have to just skip over them, but the walk and turn is supposedly 68% accurate, one leg stand 65% accurate, horizontal gaze nystagmus 77% accurate. If you look at the more recent studies, Marceline Burns is one of the main researchers at Southern California Research Institute. She's got this thing through the ceiling now. It's like 99.9% accurate. Every time she comes out with something, it's gosh darn it, it's even more accurate than the last time. And now in the 1977 study, by the way, they falsely arrested almost half of the people that were sober. And they said, well, that's unacceptable. But because this was done in a laboratory, we think that the officers were more willing to commit themselves to an arrest. That won't happen on the road. Now, one of the important things that's in this manual is this page about validation of the field sobriety testing. This says that the test must be administered in the standardized prescribed fashion. The standardized clues must be used to assess the subject's performance, and the standardized criteria must be employed to interpret that performance. If these things are changed, then the validation of these tests is compromised. That has been removed from the 2013 manual altogether. Now, they haven't done any new studies, but now they're taking this away and replacing it with pictures in this new manual, which is actually called a guide. It's not even a manual anymore. It's now a guide. Now, the HGN test, this eye test that I was telling you about, this is the introduction to the voodoo that will later result in DRE. HGN, you've all seen it, and I know that a lot of you are kind of like, well, gosh, I don't know. You can turn to the book and you can walk yourself through the steps one by one as to whether or not your officer's doing it. This is not the HGN test. The HGN test takes a full minute. You need to check to make sure that the eyes track equally. You need to ensure that the subject's pupils are equal in size. One complete pass to check that equal tracking. You then begin to move the stimulus over 2 seconds out and 2 seconds back to center, checking the subject's left eye first to see if there is a lack of smooth pursuit. You then check the other eye. You then repeat that process. You then check for the distinct and sustained nystagmus at maximum deviation by holding the stimulus out as far as the eye will go for a minimum of 4 full seconds. Then you'll check the other eye, 4 full seconds. Then you'll repeat that process. And then you'll check for the onset prior to 45 degrees, moving the stimulus extremely slowly at a rate that takes approximately 4 full seconds to reach the 45-degree mark. If you see nystagmus, you must stop and verify its presence, and then you repeat those steps again. All told, it takes approximately a minute to do the test. Anytime that you see a video where the officer is doing it in 20 seconds, I guarantee that the officer has not done it correctly. And there's People versus Berger. Berger says that it's the incumbent upon the prosecution to establish a proper foundation, that the test was done properly and that the officer was properly trained. This is the proper training, so therefore the officer has to follow these protocols. But statistically, it's not 77% accurate. Marceline Burns came out in a study that was delayed for several years. She's been yelling at the National College for DUI defense members for a long time that we're just a little slimy when it comes to this eye test that she invented. She claims that these defenses that we raised, that the officer had the stimulus too high or that he moved it too fast, those are just nonsense. You can do this thing because it's a very robust test. And this study was delayed several years. And then all of a sudden, boom, out of the blue it came with no fanfare, no announcement, just kind of quietly made its way onto the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration's website. And a couple of my friends went through the numbers because they were testing using drug recognition experts and standardized field sobriety training instructors such as Tony Corrado to do these tests on a category of people, some of whom were not intoxicated, some of whom were intoxicated, and saying, you very experienced trained officers, tell us how many clues you find, and then we're going to compromise the test by moving it faster and compare those numbers. Well, when they did it wrong 92% of the time, or 92% of the time they falsely arrested a sober person. When the person was, or when the officers did the test properly, they were able to reduce that false arrest rate to, ready, 77%. So you've got a test that's 77% accurate, according to NHTSA, and yet you will falsely arrest a sober motorist when doing the test properly 77% of the time.